You work, she spends. You lose half, even if she cheats. That statement alone has ruined more lives than it has saved. But most men don't find out until it's far too late. Picture this. You're a man in your late 30s. You've built a life for yourself. Not perfect, but stable. You have a career, a home, maybe even a vision for your future. And one day you meet a woman who seems to complete the picture. She's smart, she's kind, she says she loves you, and more importantly, she chooses you. So, like most men raised in a world that still sells the fairy tale of forever, you take the leap. You get married. In your mind, marriage is a form of security, a lifelong bond, a promise. But what if I told you that the moment you sign that legal document, you're not gaining a partner? You're signing a contract of disposability, not built to protect you, but to strip you of power the moment she decides to leave. This is not about hating women. It's about understanding the system and why it was never designed with your happiness, well-being, or even fairness in mind. You were mentally programmed in your early years to live small, to obey, to give without asking why. And nowhere is that programming more seductive or more dangerous than in the idea of marriage. Let's start with a simple question. Why are men still expected to get married? It's not because of love. It's not even about partnership. It's because, deep down, you were taught it's what a good man does. That's the myth. The trap. The code that still runs underneath everything, even if you're smart enough to see how the world has changed. You were shown the fantasy. Man meets woman, they fall in love, they build a life together, they raise a family, they die old and fulfilled. But that fantasy was built for a world that no longer exists. The truth? That script is outdated. And for the modern man, it's dangerous. Because marriage today isn't the reward it's sold as. It's a risk, a legal risk, a financial risk, an emotional risk. And most men don't realize they're betting everything, their time, their money, their freedom, their emotional stability, on something that has no guarantee. Worse, on something that is statistically set up to fail. Over 50% of marriages end in divorce. Of those that don't, a huge percentage stay together in name only, quietly rotting behind a smile. But here's the kicker. Even if the marriage ends, the man doesn't get to walk away clean. He pays. He pays in court. He pays in child support. He pays in alimony. He pays in reputation. And he pays with his mental health. Because when a marriage fails, society doesn't ask what happened. It asks what he did wrong. And yet, men still line up for it. Why? Because of the story they were told. The one that says, you're not complete until you marry. It's the same story that says your worth as a man is measured by how much you're willing to give up. Your freedom, your time, your space, your voice, and eventually, your soul. But here's the truth. Marriage no longer protects men. It exposes them. It used to be different. Decades ago, marriage was a partnership. A man provided materially, a woman supported domestically. Both roles were clear, agreed upon, and respected. That model no longer exists. The social contract has changed, but the legal contract has not, which means if you're a man, you're still expected to carry the financial and emotional burden of the old model, with none of the guarantees. She doesn't have to cook, she doesn't have to clean, she doesn't have to stay, and she can take half when she leaves. Think that's harsh? Look around. How many men do you know who lost everything in a divorce? Who don't see their kids? Who pay thousands a month to a woman who resents them? This isn't a conspiracy. It's common. And still, the myth persists. Because men are taught to endure. Endure the stress. Endure the disrespect. Endure the emotional neglect. You're told to man up when it hurts. You're told to be grateful when you get crumbs. You're told to keep giving, even when you're empty. That is not love. That is servitude. And marriage is the contract that locks it in. But men don't speak about this. Not openly, because the shame is too loud. If you say you don't want to get married, you're called immature, irresponsible, emotionally unavailable. If you question the institution, you're labeled bitter, damaged, misogynistic. So most men stay quiet and walk into a deal they don't fully understand. They think they're building a life, but they're actually giving one up. That's why so many married men look tired, distant, shut down. They didn't sign up for what marriage became, but now they're in it. and there's no easy way out, so let's be honest. If you're a man in the modern world and you're considering marriage, you need to ask yourself one question. What do I actually gain? Not what you're promised, not what the movies show, not what your parents want, but what you actually get. Will you be freer, happier, more respected? Or will you be quieter, smaller, more burdened? These aren't rhetorical questions. These are real, because the consequences are real. And if you're not allowed to even ask them without being shamed, that's a red flag by itself. You deserve the truth. You deserve to know that happily ever after often comes at a price men weren't warned about. You deserve to know that choosing not to marry doesn't make you broken. It might make you awake, and most of all, you deserve to know that you have options. You are not less of a man for refusing to play a rigged game. In the next section, we go deeper. We break down what modern marriage actually demands from men and why the cost keeps rising. Because if you're going to give your life to something, you better know exactly what you're trading. Let's strip the fantasy away. No flowers, no tuxedos, no smiling families. What does modern marriage actually ask of men? Not in theory, in practice. It asks for everything and promises very little in return. Let's begin with the unspoken terms of the contract. You will give more than you get, not because you're being cheated, but because that's what's expected. Your time? It's assumed. Your money? Of course. Your emotional stability? Non-negotiable. Your needs? Tolerated if they don't cause waves. Marriage today for men is a constant negotiation between giving and giving more. And if you ever stop giving, you're the problem. You'll hear, he changed. He doesn't try anymore. He stopped being romantic. But no one will ask if he's exhausted, if he's drained, if he's been running on empty while pretending everything is fine, because the emotional labor of modern marriage has shifted. Once, women handled the home and emotional tone. Now, many men are expected to shoulder both. You're not just the provider anymore. You're the therapist, the motivator, the backstop for every emotional storm she goes through. And what happens when you need support? What happens when you crack? Often, silence. Or worse, contempt. Men in marriages report feeling unseen, not because their wives don't love them, but because love is no longer tied to appreciation. It's tied to expectation. She expects you to keep functioning, to not break, to not complain, to not collapse. You think that's dramatic? Ask the men who cried once in front of their wives and never did it again. Not because they were mocked, but because everything changed afterward. The air shifted. The dynamic tilted. The truth is, emotional vulnerability is marketed as attractive, but practiced as weakness, especially in a system like marriage, where the man's strength is the emotional scaffolding for the entire structure. You were taught that if you open up, you'll be met with softness. What many men find is that they're met with discomfort, and eventually, distance. Now let's talk finances. Modern marriage is a contract that's economically irrational for men. You're expected to provide. Even if she works, you're expected to plan, to save, to protect the future. And if it ends, you're expected to pay. Men are disproportionately burdened by divorce outcomes. You might lose your home. You might lose access to your kids. You'll still be expected to pay support. And emotionally, you'll be expected to get over it quickly. No one wants to hear a man complain about losing everything in a divorce. You're just another statistic, another guy who couldn't make it work. That's the phrase they use, make it work. But what they never tell you is how fragile the contract actually is. She can opt out at any time, for any reason. Not happy, gone, fell out of love, gone, wants to find herself, gone. No legal penalty. No compensation owed to you for the years of service, the loyalty, the resources you gave. Just gone. And often, you pay her to leave. Now tell me, is that a contract worth signing? And don't forget, this isn't just about ending a marriage. It's about what happens inside one. The constant pressure to adapt, to do more emotional labor, to intuit needs before they're spoken, to grow or evolve in the direction she wants. Because the new narrative is, marriage should make you a better man. But who defines better? You or her? If you change in a direction she doesn't like, you're drifting apart. If you stay the same man she originally fell in love with, you're emotionally stagnant. It's a rigged path, a treadmill of self-editing, and it burns men out. This is why so many husbands become quiet, withdrawn, checked out. It's not that they don't care, it's that they don't know how to care safely anymore. Everything they say is a potential conflict. Every need they express is too much. So they stop speaking, and no one notices until it's too late, until the divorce papers are signed, until the man has mentally left the relationship long before he physically walks out the door. Then everyone asks, what happened? Here's what happened. He gave everything he had, and it wasn't enough. Not because he failed, but because the system was built that way. Marriage today demands a version of masculinity that is selfless, tireless, and unflinchingly strong, but also emotionally soft, endlessly supportive, and never threatening. In other words, a man who doesn't exist. And the closer you get to that impossible ideal, the more invisible you become. Because you've erased yourself to survive the relationship. That's not partnership. That's quiet annihilation. So no, this isn't an argument against love. No, this isn't an argument against love. It's not saying men should never bond, never commit, never share life with someone. It's saying, do not walk blindly into a system that demands your sacrifice without your consent. Know what you're agreeing to. Know what you're not allowed to say once the ring is on. Know how much of you will be tolerated and how much will be trimmed away over time. And most of all, know that you don't owe this path to anyone. Not your culture. Not your family. Not your ego. Not the woman who just wants the wedding she dreamed of since childhood. You are not a placeholder in someone else's fantasy. You are not a sponsor for someone else's emotional comfort. You are a man. You deserve clarity. You deserve freedom. You deserve the right to define your life by more than a legal contract and a social ritual. And if no one has ever told you that, then let VlaVu be the first. In Section 3, we'll break down how men can build emotional connection, sexual polarity, and long-term fulfillment without marriage, and why those alternatives are often far more honest and sustainable than the institution you were taught to chase. So, if marriage isn't the answer, what is? Because here's the truth. Most men don't want to be alone. Most men do want connection. Most men crave sex, intimacy, shared experiences, someone to walk through life with. But marriage, as it exists today, is not the only or even the best way to get that. There are alternatives, and many of them are healthier, more honest, and more aligned with reality than the fantasy you were sold. Let's break them down. 1. Emotional connection doesn't require a legal contract. That feeling of being seen, supported, accepted, you don't need paperwork for that. You need honesty. You need boundaries. You need clarity around what each person wants and what they're willing to give. The lie behind marriage is that love must be permanent to be real. But permanence doesn't make love meaningful. Presence does. Two people who choose each other without coercion, without being locked in by law, guilt, or financial consequence, are far more likely to engage authentically. No pretending, no performing, no silent resentment building in the background. That's real intimacy. And yes, it's harder, because without the contract, people can leave. But that's the point. When someone stays, not because they have to, but because they want to, it means something. It's a risk, but it's also a truth test. 2. Sexual polarity is about tension, not titles. Masculine energy attracts feminine energy through polarity, not paperwork. Many married couples lose attraction not because they grew apart, but because marriage often neutralizes polarity. Everything becomes shared. Decisions, schedules, finances, space. And over time, the tension that creates desire fades. You become roommates, co-parents, logistical partners, but not lovers. In non-marital partnerships, this can be countered more easily. Why? Because there's space, there's distance, there's still an element of unpredictability, of choice, of energetic pull. And that's what keeps desire alive. You want to maintain sexual connection long-term? Stop thinking in terms of security. Start thinking in terms of polarity. Let the masculine stay masculine. Let the feminine stay feminine. Don't blend into each other. Maintain tension. Maintain roles. Maintain mystery. Marriage discourages all of that, because it's based on the idea of shared identity. But attraction? It lives in contrast. 3. Shared life doesn't mean shared ownership. One of the core problems with marriage is the idea that once you marry, your life is no longer your own. Your time, your money, your choices, everything becomes shared. But in practice, it becomes negotiated, and in many marriages, negotiated means controlled. The illusion of mutuality is often a veil for silent power struggles. Who sacrifices more? Whose dreams get prioritized? Who becomes the support system for the other? In a non-married, conscious partnership, the default is autonomy, not shared ownership. You both get to have your lives. You both get to pursue meaning. You both get to choose when and how you merge paths. There's no assumption that you must share everything. That creates freedom. That breeds respect. And when respect is present, control isn't necessary. Fourth, marriage encourages performance. Partnership encourages truth. When men get married, they're often told, "You need to keep her happy," which really means monitor her emotions, suppress yours, keep performing. Because if she's not happy, you're blamed. And if you're not happy, you're weak. But in honest partnerships, there is no performance. There is no script. You show up as you are. You bring your darkness, your doubt, your anger, your hope. You bring your whole self. And yes, some people will walk away from that. But the ones who stay, they're staying for you. Not for the lifestyle, not for the title, not for the social points. For you. 5. Marriage rewards the appearance of stability. Partnership requires the pursuit of truth. There's an incentive in marriage to pretend everything is fine, to avoid hard conversations, to avoid change, to avoid rocking the boat. Because rocking the boat has consequences. Divorce, court, social fallout. So you start smiling through pain, suppressing dissatisfaction, living in quiet denial. This is the emotional death of most married men. But when you're not married, when your relationship is not backed by a system that punishes honesty, you're free to tell the truth, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it changes things. Because you're not trapped, you're choosing to stay, and so is she. That's more dangerous, but it's also more real. So what's the point here? It's not that men should avoid relationships. It's that men should stop chasing contracts and start choosing truth. If you want love, pursue it. If you want intimacy, create it. If you want to build a life with someone, build it. But do it with your eyes open. Don't sign a contract just because you're afraid to be alone. Don't hand over your future for a wedding. Create your own rules. Define your own masculinity. And stop measuring your worth by whether a woman said yes. You are not less of a man because you refuse marriage. You are more of one because you had the courage to say no to a system that doesn't serve you. Section 4 will dive deep into the psychological reprogramming men need to undo their conditioning around love, validation, and being enough so they can build powerful lives on their own terms. Let's get something clear. Avoiding marriage doesn't automatically make you free. Freedom isn't just external, it's internal. Because if your mind is still programmed to seek validation through sacrifice, if your self-worth still hinges on being chosen, if you still believe love means giving everything until you disappear, then even without a ring, you're still trapped. 1. Reclaiming your frame. The first shift? Take back your frame. That means stop seeing yourself through her eyes. You are not a product to be evaluated. You're not an audition. You are not trying to win her approval. Most men were raised to be pleasing, polite, predictable, supportive. We were taught to impress, not to express, to win favor, not assert direction. But relationships, real ones, require frame. A man's ability to hold his own psychological and emotional ground, to know what he thinks, to know what he wants, to speak without apologizing for his standards. When you operate from frame, you're not trying to keep the peace, you're building your own. And anyone who enters your life either aligns with that peace or leaves. 2. Stop mistaking approval for love. This one hurts, because for many men, approval's the only love they've ever known. Good boy, nice guy, hard worker, provider. We've been programmed to earn love through behavior. So when a woman praises us, smiles at us, gives us sex, we think that's love, because they're too busy performing for approval. To feel real love, you have to stop seeking it. You have to become enough without it. Only then will you attract someone who loves you without the mask. 3. Break the savior complex. Most men walk into relationships with a silent promise. I will fix this. I will save her. I will make her happy. It sounds noble, but it's rooted in trauma, because we were raised to believe our value comes from usefulness. And women? They've been raised to believe that emotional chaos is normal. So what happens? You get drawn to women in distress, women who need saving, women who bring drama, dysfunction, and then reward you with glimpses of affection. It becomes addictive. You feel needed. She feels wanted. But it's a trap. Because the moment you fail to save her, she resents you. You resent yourself. And the relationship burns out in silence or violence. Here's the truth. You are not her father. You are not her therapist. You are not her emotional babysitter. You are a man. And your job is not to save her from herself. Your job is to protect your peace. 4. Own your loneliness without filling it. One of the hardest things a man can do today is be alone, truly alone, and not collapse. Because everything in you screams for distraction, sex, attention, texts, validation, another situationship. But here's the paradox. Until you can face your loneliness and stay still, you will always be needy. And neediness is not the same as desire. Neediness attracts chaos. Desire builds power. The man who needs no one is not a monk. He's not cold or disconnected. He's calm. He's centered. He knows that connection is an addition, not a requirement. And that kind of man, he attracts from abundance, not from fear. Women feel it. Men respect it. And he doesn't settle for relationships that cost him his peace. 5. Reject shame-based masculinity. Every man who's questioned marriage has heard it. You're just bitter. You're scared of commitment. You hate women. Let me say this clearly. Rejecting marriage is not fear. It's clarity. It's the ability to see a rigged game and walk away from the table. It's the refusal to trade freedom for social approval. It's the choice to live on your own terms, even if that means standing alone. That's not cowardice. That's sovereignty. Shame-based masculinity tells you that you're only a man if you suffer. Real masculinity says, I define who I am. I choose what I commit to. I protect my energy. You're not here to meet expectations. You're here to create impact. And the moment you stop trying to be the man they want, you become the man you need. You were programmed to chase marriage like it was a trophy. But what you were really chasing was worth, validation, permission to feel like a man. Here's what VlaVu believes. You don't need permission. You don't need a ring. You don't need to lose yourself to feel seen. Marriage is not the prize. You are. And the sooner you realize that, the sooner you'll stop coping and start building a life you actually want to live. This is VlaVu. Modern Problems. VlaVu Energy. Subscribe if you're done performing. Stay if you're ready to see the pattern. Go build. No contract required.